The alarm screamed at 6:30 a.m., just like it had for the past 8 years, and Maya Chen pressed her palm against her swollen eyelids before reaching for her phone. 7 hours of sleep, according to the tracking app that monitored her every breath. 7 hours that felt like 30 minutes of restless floating in shallow water, her mind never quite sinking into the deep rest her body craved. She stumbled toward the bathroom mirror in her cramped Tokyo apartment, fluorescent light revealing the familiar stranger staring back, puffy cheeks, dark circles that makeup could no longer disguise, and a jawline that seemed to disappear a little more each month. At 35, Maya looked older than her colleagues, who worked the same brutal hours at the marketing firm, older than her mother had looked at this age in faded family photos. The kitchen counter displayed the battlefield of her latest attempt at transformation: protein powder containers, meal prep containers filled with sad-looking chicken and broccoli, and a fitness tracker that had been judging her sleep, steps, and calories for 3 months. The scale in the corner hadn't budged despite her 5 a.m. gym sessions and carefully calculated macros. If anything, she felt more exhausted than before starting this round of optimization. Maya's phone buzzed with a message from her friend Jessica back in San Francisco. "Girl, just saw this amazing new metabolic reset program, 21 days to transform your entire system. Want to try it together?" She closed her eyes and felt something crack inside her chest. Not her heart breaking, but something harder. The part of herself that had believed in quick fixes, in pushing through exhaustion, in fighting her body like an enemy to be conquered. Maya had tried everything the wellness industry promised: intermittent fasting, HIIT workouts, elimination diets, sleep hacking. Each program had worked for a few weeks before her body rebelled with crushing cravings, insomnia, and a metabolism that seemed to slow down in protest. The subway to work was packed with the usual morning rush, and Maya found herself studying the face of an elderly Japanese woman sitting across from her. The woman couldn't be younger than 70, yet her skin had a luminous quality that defied explanation. She sat with perfect posture, hands folded calmly in her lap, breathing so slowly that Maya unconsciously matched the rhythm. When the train lurched, the woman's body moved fluidly with the motion instead of tensing against it. At her desk, Maya's co-worker Kenji was already settled in with his usual breakfast: a simple wooden bowl containing rice, miso soup, pickled vegetables, and what looked like barely enough food to feed a child. He ate slowly, putting his chopsticks down between bites, somehow making the tiny meal last 20 minutes, while Maya had already inhaled her protein bar in 3. "Good morning, Maya-san," Kenji said, noticing her watching. "You look tired today." "Are you sleeping well?" Maya laughed bitterly. "I sleep 7 hours every night, track it religiously, but I wake up feeling like I never went to bed." Kenji nodded thoughtfully. "My grandmother always said that the quality of sleep depends on the quality of the day before it. How we eat, how we breathe, how we prepare the mind for rest." "Your grandmother sounds wise, but I've tried everything: sleep hygiene, blackout curtains, white noise, meditation apps. Nothing works." "Perhaps," Kenji said gently, "the problem is not the sleep itself, but trying so hard to control it." Maya's computer screen filled with emails, each one demanding immediate attention, and she reached for her 3rd cup of coffee before 10 a.m. Her heart was already racing from the caffeine, but her brain felt wrapped in fog. Across the office, Kenji moved through his morning routine with unhurried precision, checking messages, responding thoughtfully, never seeming to rush despite meeting the same deadlines that left Maya feeling frantic. During lunch break, Maya found herself in a convenience store, staring at the endless rows of bento boxes. A Japanese mother was selecting lunch for her family, choosing small portions of various items: rice, vegetables, protein, each container looking almost miniature compared to the supersized portions Maya had grown up considering normal. The woman's movements were deliberate, almost meditative, as if choosing food was a form of prayer rather than a hurried transaction. Maya grabbed her usual salad, loaded with protein and dressed with measured tablespoons of approved dressing, and ate it mechanically while scrolling through Instagram. Fitness influencers posed with their meal prep, promising that discipline and willpower could transform anyone's life in 30 days. She had believed them once, had followed their programs religiously, only to end up more exhausted and frustrated than before. That evening, Maya sat in her apartment with takeout containers spread across her coffee table, phone propped against a water bottle, as she half-watched a documentary about longevity in Okinawa. The centenarians on screen moved with a grace that seemed impossible, their faces weathered but peaceful, their bodies naturally slender, despite never stepping foot in a gym. They ate from small bowls, chewed slowly, and stopped eating when they felt about 80% full, a practice called hara hachibu that they'd learned from childhood. One elderly woman was preparing dinner in a kitchen that looked nothing like Maya's cluttered space. Every item had its place, every movement had purpose, and the woman seemed to exist in perfect harmony with her environment rather than constantly fighting against it. Maya looked around her apartment, fitness equipment crowding the corners, supplement bottles lining the kitchen counter, meal prep containers stacked in the refrigerator like plastic promises of willpower. Everything in her space seemed designed for battle, for forcing her body into submission, for measuring and tracking and optimizing every biological function. In the documentary, the old woman sat down to eat with a ceramic bowl that looked ancient, chipped at the edges but polished smooth by decades of use. She held it carefully, as if it contained something precious, and Maya felt an unexpected tightness in her throat. Her own grandmother had owned a bowl like that, small, simple, used for rice at every meal. Maya remembered being annoyed by how little food it held, how many trips to the kitchen it required, how primitive it seemed compared to the modern plates in her American household. The bowl was somewhere in her storage unit now, packed away with other reminders of a culture she had spent her adult life trying to distance herself from. If you've ever felt tired even after a full night of sleep, or frustrated with diets that don't last, tell us in the comments which part of this story feels familiar. And stay with us for the next chapters. The next morning, Maya stood in her storage unit at 6 a.m., still in her pajamas, searching through boxes of inherited belongings. Her neighbors probably thought she'd lost her mind, but something about that documentary had lodged itself behind her ribs like a splinter. She found her grandmother's ceramic bowl wrapped in newspaper from 15 years ago, the day she'd packed it away after the funeral. The bowl fit perfectly in her palms, smaller than she remembered, with a weight that felt substantial despite its size. Maya had spent so many childhood summers watching her grandmother eat from this exact bowl, always complaining about the tiny portions, never understanding why someone would choose to feel hungry when they could eat until satisfied. Back in her apartment, Maya measured her usual breakfast portion and tried to fit it into the small bowl. It was absurd. The overnight oats overflowed like a small mountain, looking almost obscene in the delicate vessel. She scraped half of it back into the container and sat down with what remained, feeling ridiculous and strangely nervous. The first bite tasted the same, but without the distraction of her phone or laptop. Maya noticed things she usually missed. The texture of the oats, the sweetness of the berries, the way her jaw worked to break down each mouthful. She finished the small portion in what felt like record time and waited for the familiar hunger to kick in, the gnawing demand for more that usually sent her reaching for a protein bar within an hour. But it didn't come. Instead, Maya felt something she couldn't quite name, not full exactly, but not empty either. A quiet satisfaction that sat differently in her stomach than the stuffed feeling she was used to after meals. At work, Kenji noticed the change immediately. "You look different today," he said, tilting his head. "More present." Maya almost laughed. "I ate breakfast from a bowl the size of a teacup. My trainer would probably fire me if he knew I ate half my usual calories." "Ah," Kenji nodded, understanding, crossing his face. My mother always said the stomach and the heart speak different languages. The stomach knows when it has enough, but the heart often wants to be filled with something food cannot provide. The morning passed differently somehow. Maya found herself naturally pausing between tasks instead of frantically jumping from one crisis to another. Her coffee sat cooling on her desk while she actually focused on reading an email instead of skimming it, while simultaneously checking her phone and planning her next 17 tasks. During lunch, Maya returned to the convenience store where she'd watched the Japanese mother the day before. This time, instead of grabbing her usual oversized salad, she selected a small bento box, rice, grilled fish, pickled vegetables, and a tiny portion of seasoned greens. The entire meal probably contained half the protein her fitness app recommended, but as she ate slowly at a table by the window, Maya noticed her body relaxing in a way that felt unfamiliar. A group of Japanese office workers sat nearby, their lunch break a ritual of quiet conversation and unhurried eating. Maya watched them place their chopsticks down between bites, chew thoughtfully, and seem genuinely present with their food rather than treating it as fuel to be efficiently consumed. One woman laughed at something her colleague said, and the sound was so genuinely peaceful that Maya felt a pang of something like homesickness for a life she'd never lived. That evening, Maya called her mother in California. "Remember Grandma's rice bowl?" she asked without preamble. Her mother's voice warmed. "Of course. She brought it from Taiwan when she immigrated, used it every single day until she died." "Why? Did she ever diet? Ever worry about her weight?" A long pause. "Your grandmother lived through a war, sweetheart. Food was precious to her in ways we can't understand. She ate when she was hungry and stopped when she wasn't. I don't think she ever counted a calorie in her life." Maya looked down at the bowl sitting on her kitchen counter, remembering her grandmother's hands, always moving with purpose, never rushed, never frantic. She had lived to 93, with a body that remained strong and graceful until the very end, despite never setting foot in a gym or tracking her macros. "Mom, was she happy? Really happy?" "She had this way of being completely present wherever she was," her mother said softly, like she understood something the rest of us were still figuring out. "She used to say that peace came from working with life instead of fighting against it." That night, Maya tried something that would have horrified her a month earlier. She put her phone in the kitchen drawer an hour before bed instead of charging it on her nightstand. The silence in her apartment felt enormous at first, almost oppressive. She realized she couldn't remember the last time she'd experienced true quiet. No notifications, no blue light, no stimulation demanding her attention. She ran a bath and sat in the warm water without a podcast, without music, without anything to distract her from the simple sensation of heat-relaxing muscles she didn't realize were chronically tense. Maya's mind raced at first, generating endless to-do lists and anxieties, but gradually the warm water seemed to slow her thoughts like sediment settling in still pond. When she climbed into bed, Maya expected the usual hour of tossing and turning, of checking the time and calculating how many hours of sleep remained. Instead, her body seemed to sink into the mattress with a heaviness that felt different from exhaustion. For the first time in months, she didn't track her sleep. She simply closed her eyes and let consciousness drift away like a tide going out. Maya woke 10 minutes before her alarm, feeling disoriented by the absence of grogginess. Her body felt rested in a way that seemed impossible after just one night of different habits. She lay still for a moment, afraid to move and break whatever spell had allowed her nervous system to finally downshift into genuine rest. Standing in her kitchen, Maya held her grandmother's bowl and realized she was facing a choice that felt bigger than breakfast. She could return to the measured portions and tracked macros that had never quite worked, or she could trust something older and quieter than her fitness apps, the wisdom embedded in a culture that had kept people healthy for thousands of years without ever declaring war on their bodies. The bowl felt warm in her hands, as if it remembered all the peaceful meals it had witnessed, all the years of nourishment without anxiety. Maya measured out a small portion of rice, watching the grains settle into the familiar curve of ceramic, and understood that she was choosing more than just portion size. She was choosing a different relationship with her own hunger, her own body, her own life. 3 weeks later, Maya's clothes fit differently, not dramatically, but in a way that felt more like her body relaxing than shrinking. Her co-workers had started commenting on something they couldn't quite name. A calmness in her movements, a presence in conversations that hadn't been there before. Maya caught her reflection in the office bathroom mirror and saw that the puffiness around her eyes had diminished, replaced by a clarity that made her look younger, despite losing no weight, according to her abandoned scale. The small ceramic bowl had become her anchor. Every meal, Maya filled it once and ate slowly, chopsticks forcing a pace that her Western fork and knife efficiency had never allowed. She discovered hunger and fullness as distinct sensations rather than abstract concepts to be managed through apps and meal timing. Some days she needed a little more food, some days she needed less. Her body seemed to be remembering how to communicate in its original language. Jessica called from San Francisco, excited about her latest metabolic reset program. "Maya, you have to try this with me. Bone broth for 14 days, then a carefully planned refeeding protocol. I've already lost 8 pounds. Maya found herself responding with a gentleness that surprised them both. "I'm actually trying something different right now, something slower." "Slower? Girl, we're not getting any younger. Every month we wait is another month of damage to our metabolism." After hanging up, Maya felt the familiar tug of doubt. Was she being lazy, undisciplined? Jessica's urgency echoed the voice that had driven Maya through years of fitness challenges, supplement regimens, and optimization protocols. But sitting in her apartment that evening, eating miso soup from her grandmother's bowl while listening to rain against the windows, Maya couldn't remember the last time she'd binged on anything. The desperate late-night raids on her refrigerator had simply stopped. Kenji had begun sharing more about his family's approach to food and health during their lunch breaks. His grandmother in Kyoto, now 96, still tended a small garden and prepared her own meals. She walked to the market every morning, not for exercise, but because walking was how she moved through the world. She ate fish, vegetables, rice, and seasonal fruits in portions that would alarm any Western nutritionist. Yet she'd maintained the same weight and energy levels for decades. "But doesn't she worry about protein intake, about getting enough nutrients?" Maya asked. Kenji smiled. "She worries about whether the vegetables in her garden are growing well, whether her neighbors are healthy, whether she's lived the day with gratitude. Food is just food. Nourishment, not medicine or punishment or project to manage." Maya tried to imagine living in a body that wasn't constantly under surveillance. No tracking, no measuring, no daily negotiations with hunger and fullness. It seemed as foreign as breathing underwater, yet she was slowly discovering what it felt like to trust her body's signals rather than override them with apps and expert advice. Her sleep had stabilized into something resembling actual rest. By putting her phone away each evening and taking warm baths without entertainment, Maya's nervous system seemed to remember its original rhythm. She fell asleep faster and woke up feeling restored, rather than simply unconscious for 8 hours. Her energy throughout the day felt steady, instead of alternating between caffeine-fueled intensity and crushing fatigue. But the changes weren't universally celebrated. Maya's trainer, Marcus, expressed concern when she mentioned reducing her portion sizes and skipping some morning workouts in favor of walking to work. "Maya, we can't let your metabolism slow down," he warned during their session. "You need to maintain your muscle mass, keep your protein intake high, and push through the plateaus. This is exactly when most people give up and regain everything." Standing there holding 20-pound dumbbells, Maya felt the familiar anxiety spike through her chest. Marcus was the expert. He had certifications, success stories, before and after photos covering his office walls. Who was she to trust her grandmother's ceramic bowl over his science-backed programs? That evening, Maya called her mother again. "Mom, did Grandma ever struggle with her health? Did she ever feel like she was fighting her body?" Her mother laughed softly. "Your grandmother lived through incredible hardship, but I never saw her at war with herself. She used to say that fighting your own body was like fighting your own shadow, exhausting and pointless. She worked with what she had. But how did she know she was being healthy, without tracking or measuring anything? She paid attention, Maya. She noticed how different foods made her feel, how much sleep she needed, what her body was telling her from day to day. She trusted herself." Maya hung up and sat with her grandmother's bowl in her lap, running her fingers along the smooth edges worn down by decades of use. In the past month, she'd eaten more mindfully, slept more deeply, and felt more present in her body than she had in years. Yet according to every health metric she'd been taught to value, she wasn't doing enough. Not enough protein, not enough intensity, not enough tracking and optimization. The contradiction felt like standing at a crossroads where one path led back to the familiar anxiety of self-improvement, and the other led towards something quieter and less measurable. Maya realized she was afraid, not of failing to reach her goals, but of succeeding at something she couldn't quantify or prove to anyone else. Would you rather force yourself with willpower or redesign your environment and habits like this character is learning to do? Comment which path makes more sense to you, and share this episode with someone who needs a gentler approach to change. Late that night, Maya made a decision that felt both terrifying and inevitable. She deleted her fitness tracking app, unfollowed the influencers who had been filling her feed with before and after transformations, and put her scale in the storage closet next to the boxes of supplements she'd accumulated over the years. She wasn't abandoning her health. She was changing her definition of it. Instead of measuring success through data points and external validation, Maya was learning to recognize the subtle signals of a nervous system finally able to relax, a metabolism operating without constant stress, and a relationship with food based on nourishment rather than control. The ceramic bowl sat on her kitchen counter like a quiet teacher, holding space for a different way of being in her body. Maya didn't know what would happen to her weight or her appearance over the coming months, but for the first time in years, she wasn't afraid of finding out. She was simply curious about what her body might do if she stopped fighting it long enough to listen. 6 months later, Maya faced her first real test. The company was launching a major campaign in Singapore, requiring 2 weeks of 18-hour workdays, client dinners, and the kind of schedule that had historically sent her into cycles of stress eating and insomnia. Her old self would have prepared with military precision, protein bars, supplements, detailed meal plans, and rigid workout schedules to maintain control while everything else fell apart. Instead, Maya packed her grandmother's ceramic bowl. The hotel in Singapore was luxurious and disorienting, with a minibar full of imported snacks and room service menus offering Western comfort food at any hour. Maya's colleagues immediately fell into familiar patterns, grabbing quick meals between meetings, staying up late to finish presentations, fueling themselves with coffee and adrenaline. On the second night, after a particularly brutal 14-hour day, Maya found herself standing in front of the minibar at midnight. Her body was tired and wired simultaneously, that familiar state of exhaustion that felt too agitated for sleep. The old Maya would have torn through a bag of chips or ordered room service pasta, eating quickly while scrolling through her phone, trying to numb the overstimulation with food and distraction. Instead, Maya sat on the floor of her hotel room and held her grandmother's bowl, feeling its familiar weight in her palms. She'd brought packets of miso soup and some simple rice crackers, laughably inadequate provisions compared to her colleagues' emergency stashes of protein bars and energy drinks. But as she prepared the simple soup and ate it slowly from the ceramic bowl, Maya felt her nervous system gradually downshifting from fight or flight into something approaching calm. The work was still demanding, the schedule still punishing, but Maya moved through it differently. During client dinners, she used her chopsticks to eat slowly, while others rushed through courses between business discussions. She took short walks between meetings instead of checking her phone, letting her eyes rest on the Singapore skyline instead of constantly consuming information. Her colleagues began to notice. "Maya, you're like a different person," said David from accounting. "You seem so unflappable. What's your secret?" Maya almost laughed. The secret was a ceramic bowl and the radical act of eating when hungry, sleeping when tired, and moving through the world without constantly preparing for battle. But she knew how that would sound to people still trapped in optimization culture. "I'm just trying to work with my energy instead of against it," she said simply. On the flight home, Maya sat next to a colleague who had spent the entire trip in a state of barely controlled panic. Double-shot espressos, late-night work sessions, meals grabbed on the run. The woman looked exhausted despite her young age, her skin puffy and stressed, her movements quick and agitated. "I don't know how you stayed so calm," she confessed to Maya. "I feel like I'm constantly drowning. Every diet I try makes me more tired. Every workout routine burns me out within a month." "How do you do it?" Maya thought about all the years she'd asked that same question, searching for the perfect program or supplement or expert who could fix her relationship with her body. "I stopped trying to force myself into someone else's idea of healthy," she said finally. "I started listening to what my body actually needed." The woman looked skeptical. "But don't you worry about, letting yourself go, not maintaining standards?" Maya understood the fear behind the question, the terror of trusting your body in a culture that taught women to view their appetites as dangerous and their instincts as unreliable. "I'm probably healthier now than I've ever been," Maya said honestly, "just not in ways that show up on fitness apps." Back in Tokyo, Maya returned to her routine with a deeper appreciation for how much her life had changed. Her apartment felt peaceful rather than cluttered. Her mornings flowed without the frantic energy that used to characterize her days. The ceramic bowl had become a symbol of something larger, a different way of existing that prioritized presence over productivity, nourishment over optimization. Jessica called to update Maya on her latest fitness journey, a high-intensity program that promised to reshape her body in 12 weeks. "I know you think I'm crazy for trying another program." Jessica laughed, but Maya could hear the exhaustion underneath her enthusiasm. "But this trainer swears it's different, science-based, sustainable." Maya listened with compassion for her former self, remembering the desperate hope that had driven her through years of similar promises. "How are you feeling?" she asked gently, honestly. "Tired, really tired." "But that's normal in the beginning, right? The trainer says I need to push through the resistance phase." After they hung up, Maya sat with her grandmother's bowl and thought about resistance, not the physiological kind that trainers warned about, but the deeper resistance to trusting herself that had kept her trapped in cycles of external validation for so long. Every expert, every program, every app had promised to know her body better than she did. It had taken a simple ceramic bowl to remind her that wisdom lived in her cells, not in her smartphone. Maya's next medical appointment provided objective confirmation of what she'd been feeling subjectively. Her doctor, Dr. Tanaka, reviewed her blood work with surprise. "Your inflammatory markers are significantly lower than they were a year ago," she said, flipping through the charts. "Your blood pressure is excellent, cortisol levels are balanced, and your lipid profile has improved." "What changes have you made?" Maya tried to explain, without sounding like she'd abandoned medical science entirely. "I've been eating more mindfully, smaller portions, better sleep habits, less stress about food and exercise." Dr. Tanaka nodded thoughtfully. Many of my patients exhaust themselves trying to optimize their health. Sometimes the body responds better to gentleness than to force. Walking home from the appointment, Maya passed a supplement store advertising the latest metabolism boosters and fat-burning formulas. A year ago, she would have stopped to read the promises on every bottle, searching for the missing piece that would finally solve her health puzzle. Now she walked by without slowing down, her grandmother's bowl waiting patiently in her kitchen, a reminder that the most powerful transformations often came from the simplest practices, repeated with quiet consistency over time. That evening, Maya prepared dinner as she had every night for months, listening to her hunger, eating slowly, stopping when satisfied rather than stuffed. The routine had become so natural that she barely thought about it. The way breathing didn't require conscious effort. Her body had remembered how to regulate itself when she stopped trying so hard to control it. 1 year after finding her grandmother's bowl, Maya sat in her doctor's office, holding test results that would have seemed impossible 12 months earlier. Dr. Tanaka looked up from the charts with something approaching amazement. "I've been practicing medicine for 20 years, she said carefully, "and I rarely see this kind of comprehensive improvement without dramatic interventions. Your metabolic markers, inflammation levels, sleep quality indicators, everything suggests your body is functioning like someone a decade younger." Maya felt a strange mixture of validation and disbelief. The changes had happened so gradually, through such ordinary daily actions, that she'd almost convinced herself they were imaginary. "But I haven't lost that much weight," she said, echoing the voice of her former self. "I haven't been following any specific program." Dr. Tanaka leaned forward. "Maya, what you've accomplished is far more significant than weight loss. You've essentially reset your nervous system, optimized your metabolism, and reduced your disease risk factors through lifestyle changes alone. How did you do it?" Maya thought about all the ways she could answer that question. She could mention the research on circadian rhythms that supported her evening phone-free routine, or the studies on mindful eating that validated her slower pace at meals. But the truth was simpler and harder to explain. "I stopped fighting my body," she said finally. "I started treating it like an ally instead of an enemy." The real revelation had come gradually, hidden in the accumulation of ordinary moments. Maya had expected the changes to announce themselves dramatically: sudden weight loss, bursts of energy, visible transformations that others would notice. Instead, the shifts had been subtle: sleeping through the night without effort, eating until satisfied without anxiety, moving through stressful days without the crushing exhaustion that used to follow. But the deepest change was psychological. For the first time since adolescence, Maya existed in her body without constant commentary from an internal critic. She woke up each morning without immediately calculating calories, checking her appearance for signs of improvement or decline, or strategizing about how to optimize her energy through supplements and programs. The ceramic bowl had become a meditation on presence. Each meal reminded Maya that nourishment was a conversation between her body and her environment, not a mathematical equation to be solved. She'd learned to distinguish between physical hunger and emotional emptiness, between satisfaction and fullness, between self-care and self-control. Kenji had been watching her transformation with quiet approval. During their lunch breaks, he'd shared more stories about his family's approach to health and longevity, and Maya had begun to understand that she wasn't just changing her habits, she was adopting an entirely different philosophy about what it meant to be human in a body. "In Japanese culture," Kenji explained one afternoon, "we have a concept called ikigai, your reason for being, but we also believe that the body knows its own ikigai. When you stop forcing it to be something it's not, it naturally moves toward balance." Maya thought about all the years she'd spent trying to impose external standards on her internal experience, measuring her worth against fitness influencers and wellness gurus who promised that the right program could overcome any biological reality. She'd been treating her body like a machine that needed better programming, rather than a living system that needed gentle guidance. The most surprising change was how other people responded to her transformation. Colleagues who had known her for years commented on an intangible shift in her presence, a groundedness that hadn't been there before. Friends asked for her secret, expecting a supplement recommendation or workout routine, then looked disappointed when Maya mentioned ceramic bowls and mindful eating. Jessica visited from San Francisco, finally ready to hear about Maya's approach after her latest fitness program had left her more exhausted and frustrated than ever. Sitting in Maya's peaceful apartment, eating soup from simple bowls, Jessica seemed to understand something that couldn't be conveyed through text messages or phone calls. "You look different," Jessica said, studying Maya's face. "Calmer, like you're actually living in your own skin instead of trying to escape from it." Maya served tea in small cups, another practice inherited from her grandmother's wisdom about savoring rather than consuming. "I realized I'd been treating my body like a problem to solve, instead of a home to live in. Everything changed when I stopped trying to fix myself and started trying to understand myself." "But weren't you afraid of losing control, of gaining weight or getting unhealthy?" Maya considered the question seriously. "I was terrified. But I was already unhealthy, mentally, emotionally, metabolically. All that control wasn't actually controlling anything. It was just creating more stress." They talked late into the evening about the difference between discipline and obsession, between self-care and self-punishment. Jessica admitted that she'd spent so much energy fighting her appetite, her tiredness, her body's natural rhythms, that she'd forgotten what it felt like to simply exist without constant vigilance. "Where do I even start?" Jessica asked. Maya handed her friend one of her extra ceramic bowls, a small vessel that looked almost toy-like compared to the dinner plates they'd grown up using. "Start here," she said simply. "One meal at a time, one breath at a time. Trust that your body knows more about being healthy than any app or expert or program." The next morning, Maya woke without an alarm for the first time in years. Her body's circadian rhythms had synchronized with natural light cycles, another gift of trusting her biology instead of overriding it with artificial stimulation. She folded her futon, opened her windows to let in cool air, and prepared breakfast in her grandmother's bowl, the same routine that had quietly revolutionized her relationship with herself. Standing in her kitchen, Maya realized that the most profound secret wasn't any specific habit or technique. It was the radical act of believing that her body, given the right conditions, knew how to heal itself, regulate itself, and maintain itself without constant intervention. She'd spent decades searching for external authorities to tell her how to live in her own skin, when the wisdom had been there all along, waiting for her to listen. 2 years later, Maya stood in her mother's kitchen in California, watching her unpack a box that had been sitting in the garage for decades. Inside, wrapped carefully in tissue paper, were 12 matching ceramic bowls, the complete set that had belonged to Maya's grandmother, the siblings of the single bowl that had quietly changed her life. "I found them while cleaning out the garage," her mother said, lifting each bowl with reverence. "I always meant to use them, but they seemed too small, too impractical for our American portions. I kept thinking I'd break them." Maya held one of the bowls, feeling its familiar weight and recognizing the same artisan's hand in its curves and glaze. Her grandmother had eaten from these bowls for 40 years in America, maintaining her Taiwanese eating customs in a culture that celebrated excess and speed. No wonder she'd lived to 93 with such grace. "Take them," her mother said firmly. "She would have wanted you to have them. You're the only one who understood what they were really for." Flying back to Tokyo with 12 ceramic bowls in her carry-on luggage, Maya reflected on how dramatically her life had changed through such small daily acts. Her colleagues often asked for her transformation secret, expecting a supplement recommendation or workout routine. But the real secret couldn't be packaged or sold. It was the patient cultivation of trust between her mind and body, developed one mindful meal at a time. Maya's apartment had become a gathering place for friends seeking an alternative to optimization culture. Jessica visited every few months, each time looking more settled in her own skin. Kenji brought colleagues who were burning out from Tokyo's demanding work culture. Even Dr. Tanaka had started recommending Maya's approach to patients whose health issues seemed rooted in chronic stress and dietary chaos. The evening meals at Maya's kitchen table had become informal support groups for people learning to exist peacefully in their bodies. They ate from the small ceramic bowls, practiced putting down their chopsticks between bites, and shared stories about unlearning the violence they'd been taught to direct toward themselves. "It sounds so simple when you explain it," said Hiroshi, a software engineer whose anxiety and insomnia had improved dramatically after adopting slower eating habits. "But it took months to actually trust that my body wasn't trying to sabotage me." Maya understood the difficulty. Western culture had taught them that bodies were unreliable, that appetite was dangerous, that health required constant vigilance and control. Learning to trust her hunger, her tiredness, her instincts had felt like learning a foreign language after years of forgetting her native tongue. The ceramic bowls had become teachers for everyone who used them. Their small size naturally guided portion control without the anxiety of restriction. Their weight and texture encouraged slower eating. Their beauty elevated simple foods into moments of mindful nourishment. Each meal became a meditation on presence, satisfaction, and the radical act of treating oneself with gentleness. Maya's latest medical checkup had shown continued improvement in all biomarkers, but more importantly, she'd learned to gauge her health through internal signals rather than external metrics. She knew she was healthy because she woke up rested, moved through challenging days without exhaustion, and maintained steady energy without caffeine or supplements. Her body had become a trusted ally rather than a problem to manage. On weekends, Maya taught informal workshops about mindful eating and nervous system regulation, sharing the wisdom embedded in traditional Japanese culture with people trapped in modern optimization cycles. She always began each session the same way, by serving tea in small cups and soup in ceramic bowls, letting people experience what it felt like to eat without distraction or hurry. "The bowl is just a tool," she would explain, watching participants struggle with the unfamiliar portions. "But it teaches us that enough is a physical sensation, not a mathematical calculation. It reminds us that eating can be peaceful instead of anxious." Most people initially resisted the smaller portions, afraid of hunger, afraid of losing control. Maya understood their fear. She'd lived it for decades. But gradually, as they practiced eating slowly and stopping when satisfied, people discovered what Maya had learned, that their bodies were far wiser than any fitness app, far more trustworthy than any expert opinion. Jessica had started her own version of the practice in San Francisco, using her grandmother's dishes from Sicily and rediscovering Mediterranean attitudes toward food and pleasure. "I finally understand what you meant about working with your body instead of against it," she told Maya during their monthly video calls. "I'm not fighting myself anymore. I'm just living." Maya's relationship with her Japanese heritage had also transformed through this journey. The cultural practices she'd once dismissed as old-fashioned had revealed themselves as sophisticated wisdom about human biology and psychology. The same elders she'd thought were behind the times had actually been ahead of their time, understanding principles that Western science was only beginning to validate. As evening approached, Maya prepared dinner in her peaceful kitchen, surrounded by the complete set of ceramic bowls that connected her to generations of women who had understood something she'd spent decades unlearning and relearning. She filled one bowl with rice, another with miso soup, arranged pickled vegetables in a small dish, and sat down to eat without entertainment, without distraction, without anything but gratitude for a body that had waited patiently for her to remember how to treat it with kindness. The transformation that had begun with a single ceramic bowl had rippled through every aspect of her life. Maya slept deeply without sleep aids, maintained steady energy without stimulants, and existed in her body without the constant commentary of self-improvement culture. She'd found something that no fitness program had ever offered: peace with herself. Sitting at her kitchen table as the sun set over Tokyo, Maya held her grandmother's bowl and understood that the most radical act of health wasn't pursuing perfection. It was practicing presence. Not optimizing her biology, but honoring it. Not controlling her appetites, but listening to them. Not fighting her body's natural rhythms, but moving in harmony with them. The bowl was empty now, but Maya felt completely satisfied. Not full, not hungry, but nourished in the deepest sense of the word. She'd learned that this feeling, this quiet contentment with enough, was what health actually felt like when it wasn't complicated by shame, anxiety, or the endless pursuit of more. Outside her window, the lights of Tokyo glittered like ceramic stars, and Maya felt grateful for the long, winding path that had led her home to herself. If this story reminded you that real transformation comes from small habits repeated over time, not from overnight fixes, subscribe to the channel, tell us which country you watch from, and invite someone to start this journey with you in the next story.